Please do let me know when I have to start.
Sure, ma'am. Just give me a time to introduce, ma'am. Then we'll definitely. It
Sure.
is a privilege and honor for all of us. And on behalf of Chitkara Business School, I welcome Dr. Jaspreet Kaur, ma'am, who is an associate professor at Pearl Academy. She has over 16 years of teaching experience in marketing research. She has authored two books on customer relationship management and service marketing, and has written many research papers in Scopus and ABDC journals. She is an editor and reviewer to many ABDC and Scopus journals like International Journal of Consumer Studies, Wiley, and Management Decisions, Emerald. She is an AMT certified faculty from AMA and has received the GRAPS Best Researcher Award in 2008 and then ITSR Best Researcher Award in 2020. She has conducted over 25 FDPs and workshops on the topics of systematic review and meta-analysis and qualitative research with NBO this year. So we are very privileged and honored, ma'am, and to have you here. And we are looking forward to learn the nitty-gritty of systematic literature review. Thank you, ma'am. Shwani, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Jaspreet ma'am, this is Shwani here. I'm with Rajat sir in while organizing this workshop. So we welcome you and really look forward for your session.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Can I start?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Fine. Give me a minute. I'm just sharing my PPT.
Sure, ma'am.
Are you able to view the PPT?
Yes, ma'am. You can put it on the full mode, ma'am. A slide share.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, I'll just switch off my camera for better connectivity and then put it on once question answers.
No issues, ma'am. No issues.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just, I hope I'm audible and the PPT is now visible to everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So I'm just starting with the concept of systematic literature review and meta-analysis. When I generally take an FTP, it's like a 5-day concept which I cover. But here what I'm going to do in somewhere around 40 to 45 minutes, leaving 15 minutes for questioning, is the systematic literature review paper. So many, researchers and academicians think that systematic literature review is something which is coming up very strongly. So I am now reviewing A grade, B grade journals, and I see suddenly, there's an influx of SLR papers, systematic literature review papers. But the problem is that sometimes the technique is right, it's not well written. And sometimes it's well written, but the technique has not been followed. So I think these principles are very, very crucial when we come to an SLR. Now, what is a systematic literature review paper? First of all, it is very, very different from literature review. And this is not the chapter number 2 of a PhD thesis or a research paper. So this is not chapter number 2. This is a whole research paper by itself. Sometimes when I start systematic literature review, people feel, okay, I'm going to describe to them how a chapter number 2 review of literature is to be written for a PhD or for a, research paper. It's not so. SLR is a research technique by itself. Okay. So starting from the objective till the end, and I'm just going to show you the whole process. Starting from the beginning till the end, the whole theme has to be like an SLR paper. So a systematic literature review paper, why it has got so famous, and a few journals that I can, cite where special issues of SLR, meta-analysis, bibliometric analysis, all three techniques which come from secondary data is coming up, is International Journal of Consumer Studies, Wiley. So that is one. And I think JBR also has a special issue, if I'm not wrong. Journal of Business Research had a special issue on systematic literature review and meta-analysis. And these are all AA star journals, very high impact factors. And then now I think Dr. Yogesh Dwivedi's journal, IJIM, that has come up with a um, new special issue on systematic literature review and meta-analysis, but only for IT related topics. So these are the 3 A-grade journals which I can see, which are, and people who are working in this domain, very prominent are Yogesh Dwivedi, sir, and Justin Paul, sir, when it comes to SLR meta-analysis. Satish, sir, from MNIT, if I'm not wrong, Jaipur, is doing very well when it comes to bibliometrics. So he's writing, I think in a month, I think I see 2-3 papers he's written on LinkedIn. So these are techniques which are coming up, okay? And these techniques are only taken from secondary data. But what does a systematic literature review do? It collects all the possible studies related to a given topic and it analyzes their results. So, at times, if I'm studying the impact of, say, attitude or intention, it so might happen that when I'm studying attitude or intention, one paper might say that the correlation was significant at 0.5. Another paper might say the correlation was significant at 0.9. A third paper might say that the correlation was not significant at all. Okay, so when different papers are done on different industries, different countries, they give different results. So if I have to consolidate something as common as attitude impacting intention, what do I do? What do I conclude as a researcher? Does it impact or does it not impact? If it impacts, what is the magnitude at which it impacts? So with too many studies happening with varied results, it becomes very, very difficult to summarize them. And SLR is one method of collecting all those papers and finally summarizing and saying that, listen, yes, there is an impact of attitude on intention, and this is the magnitude of the impact. A systematic review is very different from a narrative review. So I very often give these examples. They're there on my YouTube channel too. Suppose tomorrow I decide that I'm especially in these COVID times, I think it's taught us many a thing. So I went through COVID from 1st May to 15 May, and let me tell you, all materialism went away. So now it's like, even if tomorrow I feel like leaving my job and just being by myself, it wouldn't be a bad choice. Now, suppose I feel that I'm going to leave my job and I do not want, a 9-to-5 job sort of a thing. I want to do something of my own. I want to do my own business or something. I leave my job and I say, okay, I'm very, very fond of the game polo. So I want to form a polo team and I want to earn from that. Now I want to form a team of polo, so I need horses and I go to vendors. Okay, so I go to 2 vendors. One vendor on the left side is Mr. Narrative. His name is Mr. Narrative. And I ask him that, okay, show me the horses. So he brings in one horse and he starts that narrative, textual, qualitative description. The horse is brown in color. It's one of the finest breed in UK. It has won over 500 races. It has a rocket board speed. It's very lucky, X, Y, Z. And I don't get impressed with him because I need, more than one horses. And then there are so many horses. It's very difficult to choose. I don't even have the knowledge of those, horses and how to choose it because I've just entered into the game polo. So I go to another vendor. And on the right side is the other vendor. This guy is Mr. SLR sort of a vendor. So what he tells me is, he says, okay, ma'am, these are the 40 horses. Now, the moment he shows me these 40 horses, I see they are of different sizes, different colors, different shapes, different height, different health. So again, I get confused. I say which one to choose and which one not to choose. And if this guy starts giving me a narrative of each of these, it'll be like months together when I'll be able to decide. So what I do is I ask him that, okay, which one do you think is good? And he is a person who gives me a magnitude. He says, ma'am, the horse number 1 that you see has a power of 0.5, which means 50% of the times he's won the race. The horse that you see on the 3rd position has a power of 0.8. The 5th one has a power of 0.3. If he talks to me in these terms, it's easier for me to select the horses for my polo team so that I can win. And this sort of a description is called a SLR or a meta-analysis sort of a description. All these horses that you see on the right side of your screen, they are not horses. Convert them into research papers, past literature research papers. These 40 to 50 horses or 40 to 50 research papers have been collected from all over. So they're of different colors, so they come from different locations. They are of different sizes, so they vary in their sample size. They are of different breeds, so they vary in their research methodologies. And to some extent, they might even vary in languages. In case you can manage to translate a few studies into English, you could include them, and they vary in languages. So all these horses are actually not horses. They are the secondary data papers that you've collected for SLR and meta-analysis. And there's a power to each of these horses, which has been given in the paper. You just have to pick it up, do a few formulas of meta-analysis, and finally say that, okay, this is the the average effect size or the average power of all these studies taken together. Of course, these 40 studies that you collect will be of a particular topic, say attitude impacting intention. So that's the difference between narrative and systematic literature review. And this is what is a narrative review. I think it must be sounding very similar because all of us have done it. And lately I was writing for a paper. Today also I was writing a review for the paper. So what I did is I took up a hypothesis. In a quantitative paper, we have something called a hypothesis. So I just picked up a hypothesis. The hypothesis was, I think I'm doing a paper on gamification. So the hypothesis was fun impacts mechanics of a game. This was the hypothesis. Now, all I have to do is write fun impacts mechanics on Google or Scopus. I'll get, and then say past 5 years papers, because I only take latest papers in my research, because otherwise the editor rejects it. So I just have to go to Google search and do a search of authors that is last 5 years. And the moment I do that, I get some, it's a very specific hypothesis. And if I have, found out the gap in my research, well, I should not be getting more than 2 to 3 papers. If I get some 50 papers on this hypothesis, I may as well drop the paper because there is no gap. So I type on Google Scholar or on Scopus or Web of Science, whichever database I'm going on, I type the topic fun impacts mechanics of a game. Okay. And I get barely 2 to 3 papers because this is a gap also. I get barely 2 to 3 papers. I read them. From those 2 to 3 papers, I get some 8 to 9 authors. I build a paragraph like the one you see on the screen. I don't have a choice. Those are the only 8, 9 authors that I have. Even while selecting to write the review, those 8, 9 authors that I have, I'm biased. I take the most popular one. I take the papers which are cited more. So there are n numbers of bias that I have. And finally, I end up this one paragraph of proving that hypothesis with, say, 5 authors or 6 authors. That's it. This is the typical process of narrative review. All of us have been doing it. There might just be one person who's like really, enthusiastic, who might even go for a book of gamification and, try and find definitions of gamification. But when it comes to a bivariate relationship, fun impacting mechanics, I think research paper is the only source where you get this relationship. Books only tell you about definitions of, books will give you a definition of fun and gamification, but the relation will be established only by a research paper. So I get hold of 3 research papers, take 6, 7 authors, write my review, finish it off, go to the next hypothesis, and this is how I finish my review in a paper. Now, how is an SLR different from this is, in an SLR, I clearly define my objective. And when I come to the definition of the objective, you will know how different it is from narrative review. Number 2, in SLR paper, I'm going to cite some 100 to 112 authors in one research paper. So where my so-called hypothesis, fun impacts mechanics of a game, was limited to 1 or 2 papers, in an SLR, if I'm doing the same thing, if I'm studying this bivariate relationship, fun impacts mechanics, I will cite or I will include somewhere around 100 to 112 papers in an SLR study. So you can imagine the level of study that you're doing on bivariate vis-a-vis a normal research paper where you do a narrative review. Number two, I could pick up these 100 papers, select some 60 quantitative papers. From the quantitative papers, I could do a meta-analysis. And I could tell you the magnitude of that polo team with n number of horses, because every paper is going to have a correlation value. I can consolidate, average the correlation value with Borenstein's formula. And I can say, okay, overall, when it comes to fun and mechanics from the 60 quantitative papers I found out from the past 20 years, this is what is the correlation value. Average effect size or average correlation value. Something which you can't do in a narrative review. So where a narrative review is purely qualitative, the systematic review is qualitative as well as quantitative. Okay. In a narrative review, I might not define my objectives a priori, but in a systematic review, I have to define my objective a priori. I have to decide about it right in the beginning. So statistical analysis, narrative review, no statistical analysis, pure qualitative data, secondary data. Systematic review, there is a statistical analysis. Narrative review, full of bias. I haven't seen a paper which talks about information technology and does not quote Venkatesh 2003 or Venkatesh 2012. I haven't seen a paper of marketing which doesn't quote Kotler and Keller. A paper of sustainability which doesn't quote, say, Carrington. So narrative reviews are biased. Okay, systematic reviews are not biased. Where narrative reviews we take only from the past 5 years, even that is a bias. Taking only new papers by itself is a bias. Picking up only published papers, making your review only from A-grade papers, even that is a bias. In an SLR, when I choose my 100 to 112 papers, I make sure that I take up dissertations, published papers, unpublished papers, A-grade journal papers, B-grade journal papers, C-grade, Scopus, UGC. Anything that has been researched on when it comes to attitude and intention, I will pick it up and do an SLR. So there's no bias in an SLR. These are the steps to a systematic literature review. And as and when we finish this, by the time we finish this, somewhere around 1:45 or maybe a little more than that, you'll understand that an SLR is nothing related to review. I mean, it's more systematic than review. So let's do the first thing. And this all this that I speak about in every step, I'm going to give you examples of each step. All these things look a little complex because they come from the medical sciences. This technique of SLR and meta-analysis came from medical sciences. So although we are applying them on social sciences, they are a little more complex, little more systematic, little more scientific, vis-a-vis our normal review papers or narrative review papers. So let me go to the first step, determine the research question. Now, the research question in an SLR or a meta-analytical paper has to go through PICO. So we are supposed to define a population, intervention, comparison, outcome, PICO. If you write a normal review paper, or if you are just writing a hypothesis, what do you generally write? You say, let me phrase it for you. So if attitude impacts intention is one of my hypothesis in the model, so my research question would be something like, what are the factors which impact the consumer behavior on gamification apps of brands? This is my research question. It's a one-liner. And all my full paper is going to be made on this one research question. But when I am defining in an SLR or a meta-analytical research question, it has to go through 4 stages. And these are the 4 stages. So I need a population, I need an intervention, comparison, and outcome. Now let me give you an example of this. How do you do this? Because I'm dead sure um, many of you who haven't worked on SLR or meta-analysis must have never even heard that a research question. I mean, Malhotras and Dash and Kotharis don't tell you to phrase a research question the way I'm telling you. This is particularly something that only an SLR or a meta-analytical textbook can tell you about. So I'm giving you an example in social sciences. The reason I learned this technique and started promoting it through seminars and workshops was because this technique is, lots of videos are available on YouTube, but they are all related to medical studies. There isn't a single video which says that how do you apply this technique on social science papers, although there are a lot many papers being published. Okay, so let me take an example. One of my students actually came to me and said that, PhD student, she said that, ma'am, I want to do an SLR. I said, fine, go ahead, tell me your PICO. Because in an SLR, we have to define objective with PICO. I said, okay, tell me your PICO. She said, ma'am, my population is going to be young, ethically conscious consumers. So consumers in India who are young and who are ethically conscious, they are going to be my population that I'm going to study. I said, fine, intervention. She says, I want to see the impact of religion in India among these young ethically conscious consumers when they are purchasing, say, a luxury product. So she wanted to work on the luxury industry on this population intervention, comparison, and outcome. Then I told her, okay, what are the comparisons you're going to do? She said, I'm going to compare males and females, okay, or maybe young ethical conscious consumers of private colleges versus public colleges on the basis of what impact religion makes on their purchase decision for luxury products. I said, fine. And then I came to outcome. Outcome is something which, outcome is not new. We have to define it in a research objective, but if you submit to an Emerald journal, they have something called a structured abstract. So they always ask for an outcome, because the purpose of writing a research paper is not, ideally should not be to get promotions or to only restricted to that. We are adding a novelty to our paper so that we can give something to the industry. So if we are from management domain, suppose, and we are writing a paper, then the interpretations or implications of that should be viable to the industry. So she was doing this research and she went a little astray when it came to outcome. So when I asked her the outcome of this, she was working on an industry. She was working on luxury products which use animal skin. Okay. She gave me a good rationale. Burberry, etc., have stopped using actual fur, and there's a lot of impact of consumers turning anti towards luxury garments which are using animal fur. So I want to do a meta-analysis on all the studies which have been done in this domain. I said, fine, go ahead. It was a collection of all secondary studies done in this domain. So I said, go ahead. Now, when she came to the outcome, so till here she was okay. She explained the population intervention comparison. Till here she was okay. But when she came to the outcome, she said that, ma'am, when I asked her what's going to be the outcome of your SLR paper that you're doing, you're consolidating the research of the past 20 years, and suppose you'll get an outcome. So what's going to be your outcome? Where are you going to use it? So she tells me, ma'am, I'm not going to use it anywhere in management. I said, then why are you doing the paper? So she says, ma'am, because animals are dying. Now this is where she did go, I mean, she wanted to conclude that animals should not be killed, and she just slipped into the sociological, aspect of the problem, of the research problem. And this is the place where I corrected her and I said, no, you have to give me a managerial outcome, because this is going to be published probably in a business journal. So then she thought, she went back, she came back. And that is when she told me that, ma'am, the outcome of this research will tell luxury brands whether they should, venture into animal harm products or not, because when I consolidate the research of all youngsters all over the world and show that religiosity has an impact on this or does not have an impact on this, initially we go with an open mind. We don't, you know, um, articulate the results of the study. So whether it has an impact or not has an impact, whether males and females differ or don't differ, irrespective of that, whatever results come up, they will be useful for the luxury industry to decide whether they should be using animal skin or not be using animal skin for targeting young, ethically conscious consumers. So this is how I made her construct the PICO, and that is when she went forward. So this is the first step. Okay, I'm still on my first step, determine the research question. The second step is assemble a research team. So an SLR meta-analysis bibliometric is it's a technique where you have to study thousands of papers. You might have to screen some 100, 200 papers, and it's not easy. So having a team is always good for meta-analysis because we divide work. Number two, having a team reduces our bias because, just give me 1 minute. So it reduces my bias because, if I, select a set of papers and say, okay, we're going to take this paper, there might be another team member who might say that, no, ma'am, I think even this paper should be included, or I think this paper could be excluded. So rather than doing a research alone, in an SLR, a team always works to reduce the bias. Okay. And why am I talking about this bias again and again is because whenever I've submitted an SLR paper or a meta-analysis paper, the only review that I've got during rejection of the paper was that I doubt the fact that you've included all studies. So this is the only review that comes to me. And if there is even, lately I got a review from an A-grade journal, they rejected it. And with all due regards, the reviewer gave me 4 studies to be included. Okay. And coincidentally, 3 of them had the same authorship. So you never know, it might have been his papers only. Of course, when a paper is sent to a reviewer, it's sent to a specific, a specialist of that domain. So if I'm writing on religiosity, obviously they're going to send it to someone who, knows the topic of religiosity and its impact on purchase intention. So he added 4 more papers and said that I don't think your SLR includes all papers of the past 20 years because you left these 4 papers. Okay, and 3 of them were with the same author. So probably it was whatever, his papers or maybe whatever the case is, but the paper got rejected. And this is one of the most authentic thing which we have to prove in the paper to the editor, that I haven't left any stone unhurled. So I haven't left any secondary data paper which talks about my topic, which is not included in my SLR. So for that, you need a research team. Number 3, determine if there are any registered, in process, or published systematic reviews on your topic. Now, let me show you. Again, I'll just show you. I'll have to share another screen to just explain to you this point. And also, I'll more than a YouTube, the only narration that a FDP resource can give is his or her own experience while submitting papers, because that is not there on any YouTube. So I'm just sharing my okay, let me share screen. I think it'll be easier for me. Yeah, so this is the Google Scholar screen. I hope everybody can see this. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
So now I'll tell you one other unfortunate thing that happened. So in the past 1 year that I've learned the technique, I've written 5 papers, but in each and every paper I get something new to learn, because studying the Borenstein book and getting papers published are 2 different domains altogether. So I'm coming to the point. Please see if there are any registered meta-analysis in your domain. So I wrote a meta-analysis paper on Antecedents of customer engagement. I am from the management domain. So this is what I was writing on: antecedents of customer engagement, or determinants of customer engagement, or predictors of customer engagement, whatever you call it. And it so happened that I started this paper way back in June 2020, and I have just submitted it. Okay, so I just submitted it, I think, last month. So it took me a little bit of time. It was one of my first papers. So I had a team of 8 people. Some people worked, some didn't work. And end of the day, I submitted it last month. Now, initially, when I started the paper, somewhere around June 2020, I had checked up that there are no pre-published. So anything which is published already in SLR and meta-analysis is very dangerous for your paper. So let me show this to you. And antecedents of customer engagement, let me write meta-analysis and check if there's a paper or not. So this is the paper which caused problem to me, this one. Okay, so this paper got published in 2020 in an A-star journal, Journal of Academy of Science. And this paper is creating problems for me now. I got late in publishing my paper. It's there in the review, but this paper is causing a problem because every time, it goes through editor, it goes through desk, but when it comes to the reviewer knows that there's a study already done in 2020. So having said that, if Santini et al. 2020 have already listed the past 20 years of research, secondary data research, the question from the editor is, then what is Dr. Jaspreet Kaur doing in reinventing the wheel in June 2021? Okay, so what I mean to say is that when you're starting a meta-analysis or you're starting an SLR, so let me say meta-analysis or an SLR, because these are all consolidations of the past 20 years. Okay, so you have SLR papers also. So here you go: factors influencing customer engagement in social commerce websites, SLR. Okay, a customer engagement SLR. So you have more SLR papers than meta-analysis. Now the question is, if there are SLR papers in 2019, 2020, there's one in hospitality and tourism in 2021. So now when the topic already has some consolidated findings of the past 20 years in the last 1 or 2 years, is it a topic good enough to be taken up for an SLR or meta-analysis study? The answer is no. Okay, and you might also ask that once we start a paper, meta-analysis and SLRs take time. You have to review some 400 papers and get to including some 112 papers, published, unpublished, A, B, C grade. So it takes time. So what if another paper gets published during the time that we are constructing the paper? So my only recommendation to you would be that first thing first, check this. Okay, I checked it last year. I did check it when I started the paper somewhere around March. I did check it, but by then there was no paper. And it'll be very, very unfortunate that a paper like this does come up. But even if it comes up, first thing is check. There shouldn't be any. But in case it comes up, and what I have done to my paper is that I have read the paper of Santini 2020. I have seen what are the categorizations of factors he has done. And then I've written that my categorization of factors from the papers that I found out are very different. So the theoretical model that I have created is very different from Santini. So that is what is the USP of my research. But the problem that the study has been consolidated in 2020 is really giving me problem in getting that paper published. So coming back to the point, I hope all of you can see the screen. Coming back to the point number 3, determine if there are any registered or published systematic review on your topic. Okay. Number 4 is develop and register a protocol. Now, this is going to take time. What is a protocol? What is a protocol, first thing first? So, a protocol is something that all we formal people from institutions do understand. And a protocol is a set of norms that we have to follow. Probably when you write a simple review of literature, there are no protocols to be followed except for the fact that the APA referencing should be done and the language should be academic and the paper should be from the past 5 years, so latest papers. That's the only protocol. But in an SLR, in a meta-analysis paper, the protocol is called, it's given a name, Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis, the short form of which is PRISMA. PRISMA is a protocol which is used in all SLR and meta-analysis papers, and it was used in medical sciences also. And now, because we are doing an SLR or a meta-analysis, we have started using it over here too. So this is what a PRISMA looks like. It's like a flow chart where you explain to the reader what all you included and what all you excluded and why you did it. Because as I said, in an SLR and meta-analysis, the prime concern is that there is no paper which has been left out. And second concern is that there is no bias which has creeped in while selection of papers. So to check this, we undergo a protocol. So this is a norm of the paper which you have to follow. This is a chart that you have to show in a SLR and a meta-analytical paper. So let me explain to you the way we explain it to the editor or to the reviewers. So I would say that I took some 6638 articles and I found it in 3 article database. So I have to tell the editor that there are the 3 databases that I went through. Suppose the database is Scopus, Web of Science, and ProQuest. Suppose. So I have to have an access to these databases. In no A-grade paper have I seen that they wrote that we went through Google Scholar. Google Scholar is not considered to be a genuine database from where you can choose articles. Okay. So Scopus, Web of Science, ProQuest, because ProQuest has dissertations. So these are the database that you're supposed to be going through. There are some 7-8 good databases that are authentic, although that by itself is a bias, but then editors find these databases authentic. Whenever you get a paper published in any technique, forget the SLR, even if it was structural equational modeling, even if it was EFA, whichever technique you've used, you must have found out that what the books say and what the editors say are 2 different perspectives. So there are some things that you learn from books and some from editors. So 3 article databases, they have to be authentic, they have to be genuine. Google Scholars don't work. You might not have an access to these databases, but there are institutions where you get an access. For example, I hail from Delhi. So I have an access to MDI Gurgaon, IIFT Delhi, and IIT Delhi. These are the 3 institutions where I can go and access the Scopus or EBSCO or ProQuest databases. From 6638 articles, he says, I removed 6,000 articles on the basis of screening. So please don't skip a heartbeat by seeing that 6,638 articles are going to be read by 3 people. No, it's going to take ages. And if it takes you more than 6 months to reach to your SLR study, somebody else might just publish the paper. So 6,020 articles excluded during screening of title. So first thing is we screen them on the basis of title. And after we have screened them on the basis of title, we are left with 1395 articles and we remove the duplicates. The best method of removing this is put it up in a database like Mendeley. If you start manually doing this, again, it's we are dealing with such a large amount of secondary data that softwares really have to help us or else we'll not be able to complete the paper. So please use a Mendeley. 3 people collected papers. We removed 6,000 on the basis of screening. We removed another 198 on the basis of duplication, and we got 1197 articles. Now we started screening the abstracts. All 1,197 are not screened by one person. If you remember, we had a team. So because we had a team, I think somewhere around maybe 400 articles come to each person. You don't have to read the full article, you just have to read the abstract of those articles. On the basis of abstract, I found another 821 articles have to be excluded, and I'm left with 415 articles. Now, these 415 articles, I will go through a full screening. So if there are 3 people against, you will have some 105 papers to be fully screened. When I say fully screened, you have to read the total 8,000 words or 10,000 words to see that this is of the same topic. It can be included. It is talking about the same objectives, the same PICO as is my research, planned to be. So 415 articles, 105, 107 articles, I think each of you will fully screen. You could take up to 2 months for this. This is the most difficult process of the SLR. So you could take somewhere around 2 months for it, but thoroughly read it. And you find 319 articles have to be excluded in my full screening. Okay. Mostly, I'll tell you why we are excluding. Even in these 319 articles that we are excluding, there are reasons of exclusion, So sometimes language could be one reason. Okay. So if there's a French paper, I have the title of the paper in English. I have the abstract in English because it's there on the website. But when I start screening it, the paper is in French. So I can't include it. So 319 articles could be excluded on that basis, number one. Number two, when I'm going for a meta-analytical study, SLR is still non-statistical. But within SLR, if I have to do a meta-analysis is statistical. I need a correlation value of a particular bivariate relationship, say attitude and intention in the paper. So if it's not there in 415 articles, it will result in those 319 articles which I have excluded because the values are not there. So these are the reasons. I'm just giving you a few reasons why 319 articles have been rejected in full text. Again, in meta-analysis, I have to do statistical analysis. I need the correlation. So what use are the conceptual papers or the review papers or the qualitative research empirical papers? They are of no use to me. So I reject them. I am left with 100 papers. These 100 papers, now we 3 team members get together and we critically analyze these 100 papers as to which should be included and which should not. And we feel that, okay, around 100 papers, suppose I'm working on an IT topic, I see that out of 100 papers, somewhere around 60 papers have an author Venkatesh. So I know there's a bias coming up here. I can see a bias coming up here. Maybe the bias was with all 3 of us. And if there is a bias, I remove those 60 articles. Okay, because end of the day, when I send the paper to the editor, he'll say, what have you done? Have you done an SLR of the topic of information technology, or have you done an SLR of Venkatesh's paper? So I have to remove this. I'm left with 40 papers. And in these 40 papers, there might just be 10 papers which are quantitative, but they don't have a correlation value. So I write to the authors. If they give me the correlation table, well and good. If they don't give it to me, I'm left with 31 papers for meta-analysis. Now, if this same process, I do not have to go further for meta-analysis and just do an SLR, a systematic literature review, I could finish this process somewhere around, when I got those 415 articles. Okay, and I could fully screen it. And maybe I get 100 articles and I stop here. Because I don't need to exclude articles on the basis of the articles not having correlation values, because SLR papers are qualitative. So this is what is a Prisma or a protocol Yeah, so we develop and register a protocol for the study. We develop an inclusion and exclusion criteria. So I'm just about to show you a sample paper where you have to write what you included and you have to write what you excluded. Select studies for inclusion based on predefined principles, extract and analyze data. This could be qualitatively done when we are doing an SLR, quantitatively done when we are doing meta-analysis, interpret and synthesize results, and update review. So get it published. The moment you get it published and there's another person doing the same research next year, so then the editor will write to him that course paper in 2021 did this. So why are you reinventing the wheel and consolidating the 20 years of research? Now, this is the whole process. And so this is, a few of the selection criterias. The database is a selection criteria. The fact that attitude and intention is the only variable that I'm studying. So that bivariate relationship could be a inclusion criteria. Language could be an exclusion criteria or an inclusion criteria. So I'm going to show you one or two papers, and these are SLR papers. So, so one paper is this. Now this is an SLR paper from an A-star. I think the impact factor of this journal is somewhere around 6 point something, if I'm not wrong, 6 or 7. So Journal of Cleaner Production, it's not a very old paper. It's a 2017 paper. And he's done an SLR on green marketing. Okay, so of course, in the introduction chapter, he'll explain about what is green marketing and why it's so important and why without this study, the literature was incomplete, so on and so forth. Now, just look at table number 1. So he's used 3 databases, EBSCO, Scopus, and Web of Science, the way I told you. You have to be so specific that you also have to give the searched keywords to the editor. So I'll come to reading it down. When I read the paper, you'll come to know that he's also given keywords that he selected. He says, I have limited myself to peer-reviewed academic publications. So this is one of the inclusion principles. He says I've taken paper only from English. That is another inclusion principle. All years paper to 2015. That is another inclusion principle. So for each database, he's given an inclusion principle. Document type, he's taken only articles, so he's not dealing with videos and audios and other narratives. He's only taken articles and other inclusion principles. Right, okay, so he says this is what I've taken. So these are the 3 databases he used. After that, he has actually written, so these are his keywords. Okay, so green marketing, environmental marketing, eco marketing, these are the keywords he used. Sometimes the editor might just tell you that these keywords are not okay. So in one of my papers, I think it was antecedents of I think customer engagement, and then the reviewer has suggested that why don't you use the word predictors of customer engagement? Why didn't you use this keyword? So he suggested some keywords. I have included in my paper for resubmission, but this is one area where, it's absolutely subjective. What keywords you choose and what he likes. He's a domain expert, so he might say, okay, this is not proper. So that's up to him. So this man got lucky. Green marketing, environmental marketing, eco marketing, and eco/marketing. These are the 4 keywords he used. In each of the keywords, the number of papers he got from the 3 database he has listed, and the total number is 410 that he got. So he's listed that. Let me go to his data collection. So, and you just don't have to put this in tables, you have to write this also. So see, he's written that also. In an SLR paper, the research methodology chapter is the most huge chapter. So, like in a normal paper, generally review of literature chapter would be 2000 words, findings will be 2000 words. They are the huge chapters. Introduction and implications are smaller chapters. But in an SLR or a meta-analysis paper, the methodology chapter could by itself go to 2000 to 3000 words if your whole paper is somewhere around 8000 words. So 3000, 3500 words would just go in methodology. it's that detailed. So yeah, so he says I studied 3 databases. He's also said that please see table number 1. These are the 4 keywords that I used. He's listed that. Study selection is another column that he's made. So he's told you what he selected and how. He's actually given you what he selected and how he rejected papers. There's a Prisma. So this is his Prisma, the protocol for systematic literature review and meta-analysis. It's absolutely the way I showed you. So there were 3 databases. He removed duplicates. He removed papers on the basis of abstract. Then he removed papers on the basis of full text. That same process has been shown here. He says he was left with some 114 papers. Of course, because he's not doing a meta-analysis which needs statistical analysis, he's not reduced this further to qualitative and quantitative papers. He's taken both types of papers. That's why the 114 mark. Okay. That is why the 114 mark. And yeah, so this is what he's done in analysis. So he's written, and I remember one of the papers also came to me for review, which was like this, where the person had given this table. Probably he saw it from a research paper, that which papers from 114 papers, which papers come from which journals, that has been consolidated. Only the writing part, academic writing part, wasn't good. Otherwise, as far as tables and etc. were concerned, it was a perfect paper. But because the academic writing was so poor, I had to reject the paper. It was a paper which just showed me tables. Okay, so this is another table that he's given. He's shown how the papers of green marketing have increased or decreased over time. So somewhere around 2012, there were maximum papers. They are still on a growth, but they have reduced in 2014, again going up in 2015. He's also shown the in these 114 papers, which were the major relevant topics that have been studied. So green marketing mix has been studied to a maximum amount. You see very few papers on positioning. You see very few papers on place. When I write an introduction chapter in any paper, I generally do say, that there are limited number of papers in my domain. And it's very difficult to search a reference for this sentence, to show the gap. So I think if I use an SLR paper, tomorrow I write on green marketing and I write on, say, positioning and differentiation, I could cite this one SLR paper and say that there are very few studies done in green marketing when it comes to positioning and differentiating of products. And my paper is the one which is completing this gap. I'm talking of normal papers, not the SLR. Even in a normal paper, an SLR paper can be used as a reference that there are no more studies in my domain and there's novelty in my research. So yeah, so he's also tried to define the relationship, the definition of green marketing. So starting from 1976 till 2013, that's the last paper where he's actually defined, he's shown how it evolved. So initially it was called ecological marketing, then green marketing, sustainable marketing, green marketing, green marketing, green marketing, sustainable marketing, and then again back to eco marketing. Nowadays, the latest paper defines it as eco marketing. So that evolution of the green marketing definition he has narrated from his 114 papers. And yeah, and finally he's concluded, these are the topics, the graph that you saw: papers done on place, papers done on promotion, papers done on marketing. He's consolidated them. And finally, he's discussed that despite the fact that these are domains which are covered, there are a few domains which still have a gap. Okay, and that is how you conclude a paper. Now, if you see this paper, this is something which any of us can write. I mean, you don't need a statistical knowledge of, meta-analysis or statistical techniques to write a paper like this. Rather, a PhD scholar who's writing a basic review paper rather could write a paper like this, because the publication chance of such a paper is far more than a normal SLR paper. Okay, so I'll conclude here. I hope the process is clear, the format of the paper is clear. Questions, if any? We have 5-6 minutes to go. Any questions participants have?
Rajat sir?
Yes, ma'am. Participants, you can free to ask any question if you have any doubt. Ma'am is here to answer all the queries, and you are most welcome to share your issue or any challenge you are facing in preparing this systematic literature review paper. I think Tanvi ma'am, you are most benefited with this special lecture by ma'am because you are working on the green marketing area, and ma'am discussed about the nitty-gritty of green marketing to eco marketing. So if you have any doubt about the SLR, you may ask questions from ma'am. Tanvi ma'am.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am. I was trying to work on green marketing, and yes, yeah, that table which showed that there is very less research on differentiation, and there are papers who are rigorously working on green marketing makes less research on place. Yes, this has given me some advantages that yes, there are some areas which are still to be explored. Green marketing strategies I was trying to work upon, but yes, I can see followed by green marketing mix, there are only green marketing strategies which have been researched more. So I think this is the time I need to decide that what I have to do, which area should be extracted right now, which should be the right area to be researched upon. So I'm really thankful to you that though the sample which you have shown was of green marketing, and luckily it was like this. So I have been really benefited from that. Yes, the paper you have shown was really helpful in writing. Probably by having a look at the same with my collaborator, I will be able to write. I think I am hoping for the same that with your guidance, yes, I will be able to write at least 70%. I will reach up to the mark. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So, Rajat sir, if there are no doubts, we can call it a day.
Yes, ma'am. Our workshop is designed in such a manner that